Star Wars Outlaws is the next big Star Wars game. It comes from Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment, and it is releasing tomorrow if you own the Gold or Ultimate Edition, or you're subscribed to the Ubisoft Plus subscription service. But if you're buying it as a standard copy, it comes out in just 4 days on August 30th. And I was fortunate enough, thanks to Ubisoft, to get my hands on the game early, and for the last week or so, I have been playing a lot of this game. I fully completed the story, and I've done quite a lot of the exploration, though I have quite a lot still to do. I've played for about 30 hours, and I reckon I'm probably going to be looking at 40 to 50 before I finish everything and tidy everything up. And on that note, thank you very much to Ubisoft for giving me a code to this game to begin with. I've never had a chance like this, and I really do appreciate it. It's been really fun to put a video together like this with so much time in advance. I've really enjoyed being able to dive in and give you a proper opinion. So I'm going to be giving you a full review based on everything that I've played in this game. I have got a lot of stuff to talk about, some good, some not so good, and an overall basic feel as to what I think of this game. But I want to lead it by saying, I think it's a pretty damn good Star Wars game. I had a lot of fun with this, even if it has some faults that I will talk about. To set context, I've been given access to the game. That's the paid promotion you see as the label in the video and in the description. I've not been paid for an opinion or anything like that. I was just provided with a copy of the game, the Ultimate Edition, I will say, so I will talk about that infamous Jabba's Gambit mission that caused a bit of a stir a couple months ago. I will discuss that later, but I played the full version of the game and everything that's available now at launch, and I played it on an Xbox Series X at 1440p with performance mode turned on, which I will say right off the bat, I think ran really well. I had maybe 2 or 3 drops that were very short and a little bit jarring, but across 30 plus hours of gameplay, that's really not bad. The only notable thing, which I'll discuss later, is some story cutscenes are 60 FPS and some are 30. You can kind of tell they're rendered a bit better and they run at a lower frame rate, so that's something else to pop out if performance is your thing. But other than that, apart from the occasional texture pop in, I really had no issues, and those were like really small things, like little rocks in the ground and bits of grass. Didn't happen often, but I occasionally noticed it and just chalked it up to being the performance mode. But overall, I think it runs fine. But as I said, I've recorded my entire playthrough. I'm not going to show anything with major story spoilers for obvious reasons, but I'm going to give you a bit of a taste for everything you can do in the game, show you some different planets, show you some different things that don't spoil that much about the story, just so you can get a feel for what the game is like and offer my overall thoughts on it. And to answer a question some of you have asked me before we start this, I haven't played that many Ubisoft games. I played a lot of Rayman when I was a kid, but in terms of like open world stuff, I've played a little bit of Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue, and a bit of Far Cry 3. That's about it. I want a little bit of Watch Dogs, but I've never really finished a Ubisoft game, so I don't really have tons to say about open worlds in comparison. I'm judging this on its own merits as someone who has played the Star Wars Jedi games, can make some comparisons there, and just generally has a little bit of an interest in Star Wars, but, you know, nothing major. And I'd also just like to slide this in very briefly. If you do enjoy the content, please click the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to build up as big a community here as I can, and I'd really love it if you'd be a part of it if you like what you're seeing from me here. So let's just get right into this and start explaining what the game is and what I think of it. So it's being touted as the first open world Star Wars game, something where you can actually fully explore and get soaked into the universe of Star Wars, mess around with side quests, factions, all sorts of stuff beyond the main game story. And all of that is what it says on the tin. There are 5 planets you can visit. 3 of them have very big open worlds you can explore. 1 is more just a compact city, and another is more for story beats. But within those worlds, you have a story connecting you across the planets and a lot of exploration beyond that. You can do as much or as little of the story as you want once the playing field opens, and just have fun with it. You play as Vess, who is a 22-year-old thief from Cantonica. It's where Canto Bight, the city from The Last Jedi, the casino city, resides. She's based just on the outskirts of that in one of the lower sections, and she's basically just trying to get by her and her little companion Nix, who is a Mercal, I think is how you say it, a new species they've invented, which I think is kind of like a Star Wars axolotl. Kay and Nix are basically just trying to get by, and they get pulled into a big job to steal 157 million credits worth of unmarked Beskar ingots, and they're putting together a team to pull off that heist. That's the opening kind of teaser text for the story of the game. You've also got ND5, who is a BX Commando droid who shows up a tiny bit further into the story. Really cool character, although I will say I think he was probably a little bit underutilized. He's Kay's co-pilot, but I think he spends a bit too much time on the ship, and I would have liked to have seen him spending more time out with Kay. But overall, a pretty decent setup. So where does it go from there? Well, let's start by talking about the story, because I think that sets things up fairly well, and then we can talk about the gameplay. So if you're not bothered about story, skip over this bit. But the story is, in my opinion, probably the weakest part of this game. I'm someone who loves story-based games. I loved Baldur's Gate 3 for the story that had. Mass Effect is my favourite trilogy of games that have ever existed. The story of those is fantastic, but it actually is a really good comparison for this game, because the structure of the story of Star Wars Outlaws feels almost beat for beat the same as Mass Effect 1's. You have an opening section that goes on for quite a while and leads you in a very specific direction, and once you get that opening section done, you're open to kind of go wherever you want out of some set options, because in Mass Effect 1, you get out of the Citadel and you have 3 possible quests you can go on. You've got to do all 3, but you can choose which order you do them in. Once you've done all 3, they converge, and then you head towards the end game. The exact same thing happens in Outlaws. You have an opening section that goes on for a while, and then once you reach that certain point, it splits off and you can pick one of 3 different planets to go to. You choose the order, and when you've done all 3 of the main stories on those planets, it converges back again. And I think it's really interesting because Mass Effect 1's story, in my opinion, is stronger, but Mass Effect 1 didn't have very much to do on each of those planets aside from those main quests. Whereas with Star Wars Outlaws, if you're not that bothered about the story or it's not a main selling point for you, I don't think that should harm your opinion of the game, because what you do outside of the story is just as, if not more, interesting. I found that once I got onto the first hub world before everything split off, which is called Tashara, that I started the story, but then just got immediately sucked into all the Syndicate stuff, which is a big draw of this game. And I left the story for a little bit, but eventually once I started to come towards the embargo date, I thought, right, let's just finish the story off and see where that goes, because I found out you can play the story at any point, and it doesn't lock you out of free world exploration. You could do the entire story and then just explore, or do loads of the exploration, then the story. It's up to you. I do really like that when you finish the story, you can keep exploring. Open world games need that, so I felt it was important to clarify that is the case in case you were wondering. Kay as a character is an interesting concept, and she's played very well by Humbly Gonzalez, but I don't come out of Star Wars Outlaws thinking that she's one of the best characters I've seen in a Star Wars game. She's fun to play as, but I don't think she's anything to overly write home about. She has a character arc, I just don't think it's one of the most amazing ones in the world. And I saw a quote from Star Wars Outlaws creative director Julian Garetti, but he described the arc as a bit of a coming-of-age journey, which changes her from a street thief to a fully-fledged scoundrel that people are actually afraid of, and the name actually carries weight to it. And I think the story does accomplish that, but I don't think it does much more than that, if that makes sense. I don't come away from the game feeling like a lot of the characters are going to stick with me. I think some of the plot beats are quite predictable. I think the villains, unfortunately, as bad as this sounds, are a little bit bland. I don't think there's anything special to them, but I enjoyed going along that ride with Kay. I like seeing where she went, even if I don't think the story was the most remarkable thing I've seen in gaming. So if story's a big push for you, I'd probably hold back if it were me. But if you're looking for the exploration, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. So let's talk about the exploration. As I hinted at earlier, you got 5 planets: Cantonica, Tashara, Tatooine, Akiva, and Kijimi. Kijimi doesn't have an open zone section like Tashara, Tatooine, and Akiva do. It's all very much contained within that city, apart from a couple of story beats that take you deeper into the city, into different interiors. But I had fun exploring all of these, I'll be honest. I think Akiva is probably my least favourite because it has an interesting city section, but the exploration's a bit too dense and foresty for my personal liking, whereas Tashara and Tatooine, I had a lot of fun with. Tatooine might just be the best. I think they really captured that original trilogy vibe of exploring those sand dunes and coming across random bits. Tusken Raiders will appear, you'll see Jawas. If you're a big original trilogy fan, I do think you'll find a lot to love about, especially Tatooine's execution, especially with the music as well. It really gives off that OT vibe, which I love. I think there's some really good stuff there, especially the Imperial music that feels very original trilogy. But Tashara was the thing that really hooked me in to begin with. As I said, you get on that planet fairly quickly, and once the doors were open to me, I kind of just went and did my own thing. You'll find things in the open world that require you to have certain devices or pieces of kit that you don't get till further on the story, so you'll find that you'll go back between planets quite a bit, so you won't always finish everything on one planet then move on to the next. You might bounce around a little bit, which ties a bit into the actual exploration, because you have these central hub cities on each planet. Sometimes there'll be more than one settlement, but you normally have your big defining hub like Mos Eisley on Tatooine. You've got your wider areas to explore that you go around on your speeder, and you've also got space itself, which you can explore on your ship, the Trailblazer, and it's actually really seamless traveling between the 3 of them. You can land in a hub city and explore it. It kind of has that gritty underworld vibe. You can talk to some Syndicate people, explore, try and find treasure, collectibles, credits, all sorts of stuff like that. Then you can go back to your ship, hop on the speeder, and just drive out into the open world with no loading screen there, or get on the ship, take off, and go straight into space, where there is a loading screen, but it's a contextual one in the sense of you never being pulled away from the ship. You take off, you go into the sky, you kind of stay floating in the sky for a little bit, and then when it's loaded, you suddenly see yourself emerging into space. It appears seamless. You kind of know that it's loading into space, but I think it works really well. It doesn't have the problem that Starfield had, where everything involved fast travel and loading screens. It's a seamless one where it doesn't even tell you the game's loading. You can just kind of pick it up when you're in space for a little bit or transitioning into it. I will say that space itself wasn't the biggest draw to me. This is someone who doesn't really love the starfighter combat in previous games. I didn't love space stuff in Star Wars Battlefront. I didn't play Star Wars Squadrons because that didn't really interest me. I like being on the ground and exploring the actual planets themselves. So you have to forgive me a little bit for having a little less of the space experience, but in space, there are different things you can do, stations you can land on, quests might take you into space to fight other starfighters or look for salvage, things like that. There are things to do out there. That just wasn't something that I was as hooked on. So opportunities are out there. They're not quite as thick as the things you'll find in the open world exploration sections, but there's stuff to do with the ship if you want. And flying the Trailblazer around does feel quite fun. But the biggest plus, I've got to say, is going into hyperspace. I realize how nerdy and trivial this is going to sound, but you find your hyperspace destination, you let it load, and then you punch it by pushing both the sticks forward on your controller, and it pushes you into hyperspace. That kind of stuff just, it gets me. I love it. I think it's so fun to see. And you can even use it to get out of combat. If you're in a fight you don't want to be with some spaceships, you can just pick a destination and you're straight out of it. With every zone you're in, there's always things to do, so you're never really away from the action for long, and it's a big win for this game. The Trailblazer, your ship can be customized. You can change the visual look of it, the color of the engine fuel, as well as a charm you can hang in the cockpit, but you can also customize the weapons, make your lasers stronger, your missiles stronger. That's a bit more linear, but there are options for customization. But you've also got the same thing with your speeder. Your speeder can be upgraded in several different ways to boost faster, or have a better engine speed, or to jump and jump higher. I think the speeder itself is really useful for ground travel. You'll never find yourself always walking because there's just too much ground to cover without that speeder. But I do think the handling's a little bit rough, and anything more than a slight collision with, say, a rock will send you flying off in a way that personally can get a bit annoying. It kind of takes the edge off sometimes if you do drive into a rock, because if you're doing a mission where you're following someone and you say look behind you, which there is a set control to do, and you don't see a rock coming, you go flying off and the mission will pull you out and you'll have to go back to a checkpoint. Checkpoints are very forgiving in this game though, so that's not a big downside. It just has that momentary loss of illusion when you do crash into things like rocks. You can't shoot from the speeder other than using your adrenaline ability, which I will talk about a little bit in the loud combat section. But I wish you could actually shoot from it just generally. That would have made speeder combat a bit more interesting, because what it is in the game is just kind of driving down the speeder while people are shooting at you, waiting for your ability to be ready, and then turning around and shooting them. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but it's still fun to drive around on that speeder despite those flaws. But everything comes back to, as I said, that huge feeling of exploration. This is a Star Wars game that really feels alive. I really enjoy the Jedi games, in particular Jedi Survivor, because the story and the characters there are really strong. I love what they do with them. But as a Star Wars world, I never felt like I was fully absorbed in the way I felt with Outlaws. I didn't even really realize it until I played this game, but there are characters and species everywhere in big settlements talking to each other, and you can join into some conversations, or you can stand on the sidelines and listen in and get extra information that can lead you down on quests. There's interactivity that's really fun to test, and it makes you feel like you're really in a Star Wars game, like I said, perhaps more than any other, rather than just taking part in big set pieces or being someone with a lightsaber that goes around to do lightsabery things. You're put on the ground in that world as someone that's not really more powerful than anyone else, and you're just trying to get by, and that really does a lot of favors to this game. Some known characters do pop up, people you will have seen in the Star Wars franchise before. You know Jabba the Hutt's in there. You get a couple of odd little cameos here and there, but they do all feel appropriate. They don't feel like cameo fests. These are people you might actually bump into in the setting where this game takes place, which is between episodes 5 and 6. There is one character appearance that I did really love that I won't tease because they don't have a single voice line, and if you're not careful, you'll completely miss it during the main story. You have to kind of look around. It's just a cool attention to detail where they're not shoving these people in your face. It's just like, this is a person that actually kind of would be here at this time, and look, there they are. Okay, let's carry on. I love that. But even out in the open zone, you can come across missions like defending farmers from attacking pirates, or stopping the Imperials from seizing back stuff that was stolen from them. I do think those events don't happen enough, and there's not enough variety there, but they are extra little things you can come across, which is something else to do in the world. But you'll find the side quests and faction stuff is enough to keep you going anyway. You can get quests from civilians in whatever way it may be to do things for them, or quests from particular merchants or contract brokers that work for one of the big syndicates to work for those syndicates and do things for them. And even within that, when you're doing missions for certain syndicates, you can suddenly turn on them if you want and get a better offer to get more money and betray them and work for another syndicate. There's some good little flexibility there that can help you pick your loyalties and get different rewards. So let's talk syndicates. You have 4 different syndicates in this game, technically 5, but one is called the Zerek Besh, and they are purely story based, so I won't really need to go into them here. But the 4 big ones are the Pikes, Crimson Dawn, the Hutts, and the Ashiga clan. The Ashiga clan, I believe, are new to this game. Tried to do some research and I can't find any mention of them outside of Star Wars Outlaws, but the Pikes, Crimson Dawn, and Hutts all already exist in the Star Wars canon. But they all have their own loyalty systems with different rankings. You could be in good standing with one and a terrible standing with another, and the stronger the relationship you have with a particular syndicate, the better missions you'll get with better pay and also better rewards. One of the first things I did was max out the Crimson Dawn syndicate because I got a really cool Crimson Dawn outfit that I used for a good chunk of my gameplay, which was really fun. But having a terrible reputation with one syndicate means they'll send kill squads after you when you're out in the open world. It wasn't a huge threat. You just get some of them coming after you on speeders every now and again. You'd have to adapt and take them out. and then carry on with your business. Every syndicate also has their own unique locations in different maps. Some of them have more than one territory section, so there's a Hutt one on Tatooine, there's Crimson Dawn ones on Tashara and Kijimi, and you're allowed so far into them depending on your reputation, but if you're not allowed and they don't like you have to sneak around, and then you can use some stealth gameplay to get to certain places. Every single syndicate location that is marked as a territory has a vault you can breach, and you have to find the key cards out in the open world, bring them back, and then open the vault to get whatever the loot is inside there, whether it's a cosmetic thing, credits, or any kind of resources you can use to upgrade weapons or technology like your ship or your speeder. It's one of those systems overall with how the syndicates work that you can completely ignore if you just want to play the story, but it's one of those things that really do reward you for playing. It's one of the biggest parts of this game, and I don't think anyone picking up Outlaws should miss out on it. It's one of the biggest draws, and it's really, really fun. And I actually think it might slightly cosmetically impact the ending. I don't want to spoil it, but if you play the game and you get to the end, let me know, because I think anyone who plays it should know what I'm talking about when you get hands on the game. But it was kind of cool where I thought, oh, is that because I was working with one syndicate and not the other? It's really not major, but it was a cool little thing. I was like, huh, that's nice. But I should stress, all in all, choice doesn't really matter in this game. Choice is something that's presented to you at certain points, like do you ally with one person or the other? Do you give this item to one person or another? It doesn't have any long-lasting consequences. The biggest difference you'll notice is changing your reputation. Sometimes doing one thing for a particular syndicate will make them happy, but also annoy another syndicate if they were also working towards that goal that you've suddenly slid in on. So the only real noticeable thing is your reputations will fluctuate between different syndicates, and that is natural. You will find that when you help one, you'll annoy another, so it is a bit of a balancing game trying to get them all to like you, and I think it is entirely possible you could get max excellent reputation with all of them, but you'll have to really balance some of the responsibilities and some of the choices you have to make, which is fun, but that's as far as the choices go. There's no long-lasting implications on story. The story's super duper linear. But let's talk gameplay. What are you actually going to do within these worlds aside from these missions? Well, you've got your stealth and you've got your loud, and one of the biggest things I was seeing was questions about the stealth. Is it something you have to do a lot of? Do you have to be sneaking around? If you get caught, is it a problem? In certain places, yes, but there's two different types of stealth. The stealth within the hub worlds, the underworlds, and then the stealth outside in open areas, whether it's syndicate camps or Imperial bases, whatever it may be. Stealth in the underworld is a bit more annoying, I'll be honest, because you can't use your blaster. Your blaster has something called a stun shot, which instantly knocks someone out. It doesn't recharge very quickly, but doing stealth takedowns will improve it, but it doesn't work in the underworld. If an enemy is near you, you have to make sure they don't see you. Nyx can distract them, which I think is a very useful thing. As a character and a companion, there's loads of things he can do in stealth and loud. He can attack enemies, he can pickpocket them, distract them, he can pull levers, and all sorts of things to help you move around maps for quests and getting around traversal-wise. Really useful to use in stealth, but I do think those little sections inside the hub worlds are the most annoying, because getting caught means you get thrown out of that area and you have to do it all over again. But outside of those, if you get spotted, you enter combat, and most of your stealth is going to be in the outer areas, so I wouldn't let that put you off. I genuinely wouldn't personally. It can be a bit annoying, but the overall stealth I think is really fun. There are times in, for example, the story where it says don't raise any alarms, but you can still go loud if you want. If you get spotted by somebody, they will either try and arrest you or they'll start just opening fire on you. But if you were able to contain the situation quickly and keep an eye out for anyone with a bell over their heads that says they're going to go and call for backup, going to either a particular post to ring an alarm, or if it's an Imperial officer, they can just call on the spot. Deal with those before they fully call for backup, and you're sorted. You can take out an entire area via loud combat and then be clear with no alarms. It is definitely possible. There's even a fast talk ability that Kay has, where basically if she's spotted, she'll kind of come out with her hands up and be like, hey, sorry, and then it gives you a bit of chance to kind of assess your surroundings and then start dealing with things if you want. Or if it's one person, you can make them think that you're going to surrender and then pull out the blaster and do a stun shot, which feels very scoundrel-like, and I do really love that. The fast talk thing apparently does have a mini game, and I had it turned on, but it was never really explained to me, or if it was, I completely missed it. You can turn it off in the settings. There's some great accessibility here in this game for turning off mini games or making numbers or symbols more legible if you can't really understand them, and you can turn off the fast talk mini game. When I turned it off, I found that suddenly they were listening to me a lot more and I had more chance to adapt, so there's flexibility there for sure. But yeah, so there's options for stealth. You can walk around, you can knock out guards with takedowns that either you'll do on your own or Nyx will help you. It's perfectly fine. It is not some big revolutionary groundbreaking stealth mechanic. I do much more enjoy the guns blazing in this game, but if you want some good stealth, you'll get some pretty decent stealth action here. Nothing to revolutionize or change the world, but it's good fun. But as I said, loud is where it's at. When you're in combat, you have your blaster. It's the only weapon you have on you, and it's the only weapon you'll use throughout the game that is constantly on you, but you can pick up weapons in the outside world, whether it's a Stormtrooper's E11 blaster rifle or a sniper rifle a scout trooper might have. The only downside of picking up weapons is they have limited ammo, and you also can't carry them up ladders or through air vents, which is a big thing in stealth. You can go through air vents to dodge guards or get to certain areas without being spotted by enemies, and I think it's a bit of a shame that the guns are that restricted that as soon as you go through a vent or you go up a ladder, you're not carrying them anymore. Now you can get to the top of a ladder or the end of a vent and then use Nyx to go and fetch the gun and bring it back to you, so there is a workaround, but once you get further into the game and you get better upgrades for your blaster, you kind of feel self-sufficient with that anyway. anyway. There's a bit of a curve, but I think you will reach a point where you suddenly go, oh, it makes more sense to just be using the blaster. But you'll always have fun picking up an assault rifle, at least I think so personally. Your blaster has different modules. There's a standard shot, there's an ion one that's good for dealing with shields and tech and electricity for certain puzzle solving, and there's a power one that fires a big explosive bolt, and as I said, stun shot. All of them can be customized and upgraded, bar the stun shot, which I think is a missed opportunity. Could have been some upgrades there to maybe have 2 charges or a faster recharge, but sadly not. But the gunfights do feel fun. I did play on the lowest difficulty because I actually thought they were quite challenging on the normal difficulty. That might just be me and a bit of a skill issue, but there's a bit of challenge there. I don't think too many enemies are bullet spongy. I just think the enemies are actually quite good at doing their job and trying to take you down. You do get some bullet sponge enemies like the Zerek Besh heavies that appear during the story, the biggest offenders being the Death Troopers, but for story reasons and for them being the big threat that they are for the Empire, I don't mind that personally. They're meant to be a bit of a challenge, but all in all, headshots are king. You aim for the head, you'll kill enemies a lot faster, but body shots will take a few hits. But you'll fight a range of enemies like stormtroopers, heavy troopers, officers for the Empire, scout troopers, but also pirates, agents, and hired guns for a bunch of syndicates. You'll find a lot of different people you'll fight in this game. And as you're fighting, you'll also have something I mentioned earlier called the adrenaline system, which is very much Star Wars' answer to Deadeye from the Red Dead Redemption games. You'll slow down time almost completely, you mark some targets, and then she quickly dispatches all of them. Sometimes the shots won't land if an enemy's behind cover and the shot doesn't quite get there, but it's a really fun ability that is also upgradable. You start by only being able to mark 3 people, and you can't kill any heavy enemies. You can stun them, but you can't kill them. By the end of the game, I'd upgraded it so up to 6 people could be targeted, but I could also mark heavy enemies twice, and if I do that, that will kill them. So Death Troopers, for example. If I had 3 Death Troopers come up to me, I could activate Adrenaline with my 6 marks, put 2 on each, and kill all 3. Really fun to upgrade and customize with that. It was one of the best parts of combat. I loved that ability. So you'll use your guns, you can also pick up grenades, and you have a smoke bomb that can kind of distract enemies and give you a bit of a chance to escape, as well as back to tanks, which work a bit like stims in the Jedi games. They'll heal you up to full health, and your health bar is also upgradable. You start with 3 health bars, but I had 7 by the end, and I think you can get even up to 8. And the only thing to mention for combat beyond that is the wanted system, something that really interested me. Unfortunately, like the story, this is one of the other only big things in the game that feels undercooked to me, because you gain wanted level by, as I said, committing crimes in front of Imperials, whether it's theft or whether it's attacking Imperials, but it doesn't play out like you might think in, say, a GTA game with a wanted system, where it's very linear. The more upgrades, the more response you get. That is true, and you do get more stormtroopers coming after you the more you have, but it caps out at level 6, where you have to deal with Death Troopers, and then an Imperial officer next to them will have a key card, you scan on a terminal, and that will clear your wanted level. That sounds fun in theory, except they don't come to you. You hit a level 6 wanted level, and then the game says, oh, Death Troopers are spawned about 2 kilometers away. Go over to them, deal with them, and that will clear your wanted level. While I understand the idea that you're meant to have a challenge to get there and clear your name, and you're meant to put up with the Imperials going after you while you're going there, I think it's a real shame that the Death Troopers don't come to you. They are a threatening enemy to fight when you haven't got loads of upgrades, and I think it would be really cool if, like, for example, in GTA San Andreas, where when you got max wanted level, tanks would just start coming at you. I'd love the idea that Death Troopers could just suddenly appear. A shuttle would come down, some Death Troopers would walk out, and if you dealt with them, you could put out some signal that would take the wanted level off you. That'd be great. But I think what's happened as a result of the developers giving you other ways to deal with wanted levels, like slicing into Imperial terminals or bribing corrupt Imperial officers in certain settlements, they've tried to keep it open that you can go to each of these things to get rid of your wanted level. And sure, that's fine, but I never once used a corrupt officer. Maybe that's the way I played, but I don't feel like they're the thing I'd always go to if I wanted to get rid of a wanted level. And slicing into the Imperial terminals, this is something you can do in a lot of tech. You have a slicing minigame where you pick out the correct combination of symbols to get into a certain thing. Slicing in to remove your wanted level I did once or twice, but that was only because I saw it suddenly pop up. I was often going into Imperial terminals to take money out of them, like arrest credits, or to turn off security systems, things like that. So I genuinely think the best way to deal with the wanted level was to build it up and then deal with those Death Troopers. That was really fun. I just don't like that I had to go and deal with them myself. I had to go out of my way to find them. That was a little bit of a letdown, personally. Nearly there, don't worry, but as I hinted at earlier, there is some customization in this game. Kay can have different outfit pieces, a jacket, a belt, and pants. Some of them will have different abilities, and some of them are sets, where if you wear all 3 items, they give you a particular bonus, like smoke grenades recharging faster. But the thing I actually didn't realize until right at the end of me playing this game over the last week was that you can transmogrify, which means you can pick a certain item for its boost and then over the top change the appearance of it to look like a different item. So for example, maybe I really like the Crimson Dawn outfit, but I wanted the boost from Kay's Outlaw set that she gets as she progresses through the story. I made her equip the Outlaw stuff and changed it all visually to the Crimson Dawn stuff. So customization there is great. Nyx can also have little bits of cloth or fabric brick or goggles on him, which is just kind of like random little bits of customization. It's not some big thing, but it's kind of cool. And you can also get a stat boost based on different foods you find in different hub worlds. If you complete a little food mini game with him that feels very much ripped out of a Yakuza game, but it's very dramatic, pressing buttons to help them eat food or deal with like spiciness. It's fun, it's charming. But every time you do one of those, you'll get a different dish to give Nyx as his equipped meal that gives him an extra ability, like being able to distract multiple guards at once, things like that. But in terms of accessibility, like I said, there's the slicing mini game. There's also a lock-picking one using a data spike where you have to time your button presses with a certain pattern that appears on screen. I enjoyed them a lot, but there's a lot of accessibility options, as I've said, to make them easier. Whether it's the symbols on the slicing becoming numbers so it's easier to spot them out and order them correctly without getting confused, because a lot of the symbols do look similar. Or even in the Kessel Sabacc minigame, which I want to get into now, the cards that you have can have visual numbers on them that are more clear, like more modern numbers, or the more default Star Wars type ones. Well, Kessel Sabacc is the last big thing that I want to talk about, because I just want to give it a bit of love, a bit like playing a Red Dead Redemption game where you could walk into a saloon and start playing poker. Kessel Sabacc is really fun. Sabacc is a card game that exists in Star Wars generally, but I think Kessel Sabacc is either new or has been a bit adapted for this game specifically. You have a pair of cards and you're trying to get the best pair possible, so the lowest pair of numbers, but you have different abilities you can go along with them. You have 3 shift tokens that you can use to twist the game in your favor, whether it's getting people to lose some of their chips, redraw someone else's hand, things like that, and even a separate quest line where you're trying to find high rollers and take them down to establish yourself as a big name in the Sabacc game. I actually haven't finished that. I'm still trying to look for more high rollers, so I don't know how that ends, but I'm having a lot of fun playing it regardless. Every time I found a Sabacc table, I'd sit there for 20-30 minutes, however long it took me to win. Sometimes it was quick, sometimes less so, but I really had fun playing it. I thought that was a really fun thing to do as well in the game. There's just a lot on offer aside from that main story, and that's this game's biggest win. It makes you feel like you can do a lot in the Star Wars world, which is something I don't think any other game has quite managed in this way before. But it does have some issues, so I just want to go through a few downsides I spotted through my gameplay. None of these are particularly overly offensive, but I just want to mention them to show you that there are some issues, but I think overall the package is still worth it. For one thing, lip syncing in cutscenes I think is pretty bad at times. You won't be able to see the lips moving in time with the dialogue. There's the cutscene issue I mentioned earlier where some are 60 FPS and some are 30 FPS. It's a bit immersion breaking, but I do think it's because certain cutscenes were rendered as more high quality ones for bigger story beats, so I kind of get it. I just don't love it. There are only a couple of things quest-wise that annoyed me. One was having to follow Nyx to track to a certain location and he wasn't moving, he was just following you. Restarting the game fixed it, so that wasn't a big problem. But the weirdest one was a convoy mission I did where I was helping the Hutts escort a certain convoy to a location and defending them from the Crimson Dawn. I found it challenging generally, and I was on the easiest difficulty. The space combat was a bit of a challenge, but yeah, sure, that's a skill issue probably. But at one point I was offered to stick with the Hutts or go with the Crimson Dawn and actually betray the Hutts. I chose to stick with the Hutts because I wanted to up their reputation, and then a little bit later the Hutts just started attacking me anyway, and I don't think it was intentional because none of the ships could be damaged. I was trying to shoot at them when they fought back at me. I still managed to finish the quest and I just hyperspaced out of there and it was fine, but that was a bit odd. Just want to point that out. So there are some issues here and there you'll find, but the only thing I think that's not an actual game bug that I would like to change is when you have terrible reputation with the Syndicate, their icon will appear in glowing red in the top left corner, and I had that for the Pikes throughout the end game. So right through the gameplay, for I think nearly all of it, if not all of it, that Pike symbol was up there, and it was just a bit annoying. I'd love an accessibility option to just turn that off. Alright, so I've waffled on a lot, so I want to round off by talking about the future of this game and talking about the Season Pass model, because it was a point of contention for a lot of people a few months ago. For what it's worth, I don't think the pricing model is very good for this game. I do think I could recommend the base package if you're not bothered about the story being a little bit thin, but the Gold and Ultimate Edition give you access to the Season Pass. It gives you 2 DLC packs that will release, one later this year and one next year. One surrounds Lando Calrissian, and another is working with pirates and helping Hondo of Star Wars Clone Wars fame. But the thing that kicked up a lot of fuss was that buying the Gold or Ultimate Edition gave you access to Jabba's Gambit, which is a mission as part of the Season Pass that you can play on day 1. This mission, I'm gonna tell you right now, you don't need to worry about it. Jabba the Hutt has a presence in the base game, and it's really good what they do with him. He's not there for 50 hours or something, but he's a good threat, and he plays an integral part of Tatooine's story, and that's enough. You do not need Jabba's Gambit mission. It's basically just a mission that gives you a bit more context about ND5 as a character and his relation to Jabba the Hutt. It's a little bit of a story beat that you can easily go without. Don't worry about Jabba's Gambit. I genuinely think you could just look that up online and see what that's like playing it through. The actual base game has more than enough stuff. If you just want to buy into the base game, experience that world, and enjoy Kay's story, you'll get enough out of that. The Season Pass is optional if you really want to see more of that world when it comes out, but I don't think you should be in any rush to go for it. I think it's a little bit expensive when really the base package is enough. And so that leads me to summing up all of Star Wars Outlaws, and I'm settling on roughly a 7 out of 10 for the experience. I value stories in a lot of games, and that's why it's brought it down for me. I think it's a pretty damn good experience, and it's one of the better Star Wars games out there, but if you're looking to just get into a Star Wars game, get immersed in that world, and have fun playing as a scoundrel, you'd give it a higher score than me. I genuinely do think so. It's just the story lets it down a little little bit for me personally. And overall, having played it for, like I said, about 30 hours, I genuinely do recommend it. And so there you go. That's my thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws. I really hope this video is not as long as it's looking right now, because we are at 48 minutes in my recording, but I had a lot to say, and I hope that you all enjoyed my take on this game. I will be streaming this on my Twitch, not tonight when this video goes up, but tomorrow at about 7 or 8 p.m. UK time BST at twitch.tv/RedArcherLive. Thank you again to Ubisoft for giving me access to this. I truly do appreciate it. As I said, all I did was get the game paid for by them to give me the code. I'm not paid for an opinion here, genuinely. I'm really grateful to them. This is an experience I've never quite had. I know for Payday 3 I got flown out to Stockholm to try the game a bit early, but it wasn't a review embargo where I played the game ages before and talked about it in depth. It was just getting a peek at it. This is a very unique experience to me, and while for some media people and YouTube people it may be something they get a dime a dozen, for me it's a first, and I'm so grateful for it. And I hope if anyone else out there is watching that, I'd love to do more of these kinds of videos. It was really fun to dive in early and get a proper opinion piece out. I only hope that you all have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. I really have had a lot of fun doing this, so thank you very much to Ubisoft for that. It means a dear amount to me. But there you go. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have enjoyed and you want to see more content, please do click that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. But I will see you all very soon with some more content. Thank you all very much for watching and for giving me this chance for a different video. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative. Do let me know what you think of Star Wars Outlaws, either based on my opinion or what you've played of it if you get in the game yourself once you've got your hands on it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.